Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to Cosmic Metamorphosis. My name is Kat. Hopefully, you, my soul family, are doing well today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just finished up my last video, and I figured today, while I had a little bit of time extra, I just finished the rest of Alex Collier's July 29th Intel webinar. So we're going to do that today too, so I can get it out of the way, get caught up. Anyway, today I am wearing my t-shirt, my Ground Crew Terra t-shirt, and my really cool little, I forget what it's called, but it's an African amethyst, and it was in the shape of like a pyramid, the tip of a pyramid. So I had my friend wire wrap it, and so I have it on a smaller chain. Anyway, so there's quite a bit to go over today, so I'm just going to get into it. We just had a bunch of clouds and had a bunch of rain, some really huge droplets come down, and now the sun's coming out, so very strange weather. Fall is coming, so real soon. It is getting darker earlier, I've noticed, so by used to be 9:30, 9:45, it would get dark here where I am, and now by 8:30 it is dark. So I barely have time if I get off at 7 at night or 7:30. I barely have time to come home and water my plants at night. So I don't like it. I like spring and summer where the light stays out, till almost 10 o'clock at night. I love that. I just love it. It makes the day longer. You get things done. Yes, I love fall, but in a different way. But I don't like the fact that it gets dark at like 4:30. I hate it. I just hate it. I just want to put my PJs on and go to bed. Anyway, so let's get into Alex Collier's number 162 webinar from July 29th of 2022. Okay, he says, it's been an interesting week to say the least, he says, and I appreciate you guys being here. He says, we're going to cover some old information that the A's gave that is more relevant today than when it was given to me. And because we're beginning this transition now, he says, we're beginning this transition fully into fourth density. And as you're aware, if you're looking at politics, there is a separation. There is a massive division being created. If you look at the racial equality, things of that nature, they're also doing everything they can to create division. He says the news media, obviously, there's a division there. He says monetary cycles and circles, there's a division there. There's all the separation that's occurring. And of course, if you're looking at exopolitics, now we're also beginning to see a division here. It says now on the surface, it's like, oh God, what's happening? It says, but in reality, this is probably a really good thing. And I want to share my perspective on this. And the reason for that is that I read the chat boards, he says, and there have been some pretty interesting comments about this. He says, is that this is a dark hat, this is a white hat perspective, special ops, psychological ops, and I think you need to clearly look at the idea that everything that has to do with our society right now globally is a psyop. It says everything's under a psyop. And I think we should operate from that perspective, that everything we're seeing is a psyop. And I think there is a very good specific reason why that is. He says, now, I have mentioned this before, and I'm going to read to you one more time today. this moment because we're going to go into it, and ultimately this is where we are going. It says, I once asked Visayas to give me a definition of our future and what it was going to be. He said that he couldn't tell me because it all involved probabilities. And I said, what can you tell me? And he says, well, I can give you a definition of that. And the definition he gave me was this. This is the definition of where we're supposed to be going. And he says, we will reach this point. He said, responsible freedom of self-determination, becoming truly self-confident and free, to unconditionally be responsible for oneself without being coerced by some higher authority. What you are looking for, you already are. It says, benevolent civilizations practice the law of consistency, and the law of consistency dictates and operates with the presumption that every generation does everything it can to help prepare and help evolve the generations behind it, so that the generations that come up behind us would have more knowledge, be more astute, be more intelligent, and be able to think more clearly than we do. In other words, holographically, they would have more holographic intuitiveness and vision than we do. So if we have a 10,000-foot perspective of reality, they would have 20 to 25,000 feet perspective. It says, and each generation behind it would have a higher and higher perspective. If you look at everything that's being disclosed today, all the contrast, that's being shown to everyone. It isn't about choosing a side, though we tend to do that because of our training and our upbringings, all the psyops before that. One's light, one's dark, one's good, one's bad. The idea here is that everything that we're going through, all the things we are being shown, all the perspectives that are coming to light, all the information of all the contrast that is being displayed for everyone, not that everyone can see it, but those that want to see it and are awake. All of this leads to a place where you go within and you self-empower yourself and you decide what is real and what is not, what you resonate to and what you don't. And what I'm talking about is you taking the information, you see the information, but you feel it on the inside. You feel its resonance, and that which you do not resonate to, you just let go of. That which you do resonate to, you absorb and you begin to work with it. That changes over time as we become more and more astute. As we become more aware, the more that we see, the higher frequencies and experience, the higher frequencies. Those things you've got a serious gut check on. It says today, it's not that gut check will change, but you're gonna be drawn to a higher vibration, a higher truth that resonates at a higher frequency. And those things that you have today will move away as you continue to evolve into the higher frequencies. And those frequencies are much more broader. You will have more information than we all have today, and it's going to be staggering. But we will be able to process it because our minds are beginning to change, and we see life and reality holographically. And what I mean by that is that we will have a perspective from at least 7 different points of awareness. It says we should have been there already, but that's another story. They held us back. It says a lot of what's going on today is being done specifically to put us into fear, because we all know what fear does. It lowers our vibration, it disempowers us on the inside, and it draws us out so that we're focused on the physical world, not the internal world. This is now. I've not read this. I've not read this a long time ago. It's been a long time since I've read this. Okay, he says he tried to find it, whatever he was trying to read, and he says, okay, never mind. He says the book is so old. He says the pages just came out. So he tried to find something to read and he couldn't read it. So he just kind of continues and he says, we all have to try to work to focus, all of us, on what's going on the inside. It's always been there anyway. There's an excellent video that I watched last night that somebody posted on Knights of Terra. I don't know who the young woman is who was talking in it, but the title of it was Unlocking the Holy Grail and Returning to the Garden of Eden, New Earth Announcement, 7/28/22, July 28th of 22. It was really, really good, he says, and I don't know about all the historical content, but the way it was presented and the information and how it relates to today, I thought was very, very, very good. And if you get a chance to find it, and if you see it, he says, I know it's on YouTube, at least. He says it was this morning. That could change. So again, he repeated the title, Unlocking the Holy Grail and Returning to the Garden of Eden, New Earth Announcement, 7/28/22. I started watching it and then I got busy and I couldn't finish it. She is pretty good. Says, and essentially what it was about was the relationship between the male frequency and the feminine frequency. And we've talked about this for years. Those who have followed the information, says the A's have always referred to, if creation had a specific gender, it would be the feminine. They've said that from the get-go, and I've shared that with all of you, as well as I think that's a perspective that more and more is going to be coming to the forefront in the awareness of everyone. It says now, for anyone who's paying attention, there is a difference between men and women. Obviously, physical, but there's others. He says the biggest one is what men think and feel. That's the biggest difference. And it is that feeling. It is that being connected to source, that openness, that vulnerability, to remain open to source, to creator that empowers women when it comes to things such as healing, intuition, the ability to connect to those outside of their physical circle, to see things in a very different way, to have a very different perspective than a man would have. And there has clearly been an effort to disempower the feminine principle on our planet. And I think to a very, very large degree, one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest problems that humanity has had is because it's been out of balance. And that out of balance is pretty prevalent right now. And if we look at all of the wars, if we look at the attack on humanity itself, if we look at the mistreatment of the earth and all of her resources, you can clearly see a masculine frequency that's out of balance. And I wish it were something other than what it is. I do. But you know, the one thing that we can always count on, and the one thing that we can always be sure of, is that at some point, no matter what, the truth is always going to remain. It says, when everything else falls away, all the propaganda, all the dogma, all the psyops, when all that shit just falls away, the only thing left standing will be the truth. It says, so, as we are being forced to go within and empower ourselves with our own intuition, with our own gut checks, with our own intuitive knowingness, not only will we become more free and self responsible, but the more empowered we become, the less able we will be and be subject to coercion from some supposed higher authority. Yes, we don't need government to tell us what to do. So, humanity is supposed to become a race of leaders, independent yet working together as one. Independent that on an emotional level and a spiritual level, we're not dependent on someone else. We have ourselves. We know who we are at the core of our being, and therefore, whatever storm we find ourselves in, we know that we're going to weather it. We're going to move through it, that we're going to pass through it. And that no matter how bad it is, at some point, the sun always rises and the sunshine comes out. Just came out. We will always move through it, and when it's behind us, we'll have perspective and we will have learned from it, because wisdom comes from experience. And as we're being surrounded by all this division, by all these psyops, white hat, black hat, no hat, who actually knows where all this is coming from? Says the bottom line is that it continues to be this. Do you know who you are? And do you know what it is that you want? Those things are unshakable. Those things are immovable. We all individually know what those things are. And by our example of being this and stepping into our power and stepping into the leadership role, we become an example for those behind us, whether it's our children, our grandchildren, great grandchildren, or just the kids in the neighborhood that we know and we see, because this is the time. And he says it twice. This is the time. Things are moving much, much quicker. Soon we're going to have the EBS. It's coming. I don't have a date. He says, I don't have a week, but it's coming and it's soon. I hope so. God, I hope so. He says, once we have the EBS and the white hats in the military and the patriots of every country begin to remove those who have committed crimes against humanity, there are going to be voids in power, vacuums. He says, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to be the ones to step up into those places to fill those voids, that vacuum. You have to do it. You have to do it. We have to do it. As scary as that might be, because we're the ones that have the knowledge. Doesn't mean we have perfect knowledge, but we have a clear perspective of what's going on, what cannot continue, and what needs to happen going forward. And even though we're not going to have the knowledge we need, this is more about character than it is about anything. Depends on the content of your character. Exactly. So we need good people, bright people, honorable people, people who care about humanity, filling those positions, filling those voids of power so that they can rise and lift all boats together. Not just their boat, all boats together. The information and the knowledge we need moving forward will come, because it's the belief of many that I've talked to, people that I think extremely highly of, that once the EBS comes out and the militaries and the patriots of all countries begin to remove the cancer from their political societies, their media, all the cancers that are involved, as they are removing that from their societies, their cultures, Space Force will then move forward. come forward and begin serious disclosure. Now we're already seeing disclosure, he said, in many different forms. But the process of Space Force coming forward is that they will begin to discuss the relationship that they've already established relationship with off-worlders. It says, and it'll be then that we begin to know from which stars they come from. Because we will also begin to be told about the history of our civilizations on planet Earth and how far back they go. And they go back very, very long time. Very long time, he says. Now, I shared with you decades ago that the A's said at one point what they would do is that we would have all the information we needed, and then they would step back and watch how we act with each other, how we treat each other, because what we have is each other, how we interact, how we move around and through each other, how we share information, how we communicate with each other is absolutely paramount to creating a soul group of Terrans on Earth. So now, yes, many of us are connected to other soul star groups, and you always will be. But we are creating our own soul group here on Earth. And that soul group has experience in third density. And they are opening doors and portals and calling forth higher frequencies to move our soul group into fourth. And from that place, we will do exactly the same thing. We will call forth higher frequencies, higher knowledge, open portals that we can move into fifth. This is an extraordinary experience, not be only experiencing, but to be creating together. Together, we're doing this together. We have to understand. We have to appreciate. We have to come to terms with the idea, not just the words, but actually feel it, ingrain it, become one with it, that we are all family, regardless of our race, colors, or creeds. And we all have to come from a place of mutual respect. And that means we have to not only learn to truly appreciate our differences, but the fact that the feminine principle and the masculine principle have to come into balance. The male principle has to be a responsible partner to the feminine. It just has to be. And the A's said years and years and years ago, that hardest time processing the new energies because they're feminine. Says what we're experiencing is the biggest shift is the feminine principle. Kind of wrote that wrong a little bit. So the hardest time will be processing the new energies for the masculine, basically, is what he was saying. Because these energies coming in are feminine. So men are going to have a very hard time. I'm sorry. He says, it is returning. It is no longer being suppressed by any masculine energy. And men would have a hard time with it because all they know, he says, is the fucking training, is the psyop, And this has been for generations and generations and generations. And it's been done intentionally to create disbalance. Because whoever is behind this, whoever says who has been behind the conditioning and programming of humanity, says they know what they were doing. And it wasn't the male principle that was the threat. It was the feminine principle, the female principle that was the threat. Because the feminine principle by its very nature, is more connected to Source. And in order to control us, they had to separate us from Source. So without the male principle realizing it, we help create this imbalance, whether our intentions were good or not, because we simply didn't know. It says maybe some did, maybe some are. They are who they are. Those souls will not evolve into a higher frequency unless they change. Remember, at this point, it's all frequency. Everything is frequency. You're either in line with the frequency, you're in harmony with the frequencies that are changing, or you're not going to be. And if you're stuck in third density and you simply refuse to move into and blend with, align with the frequencies that are occurring with the planet and in our solar system as a whole, then you're going to move on. You're going to move on. Because it's all changing and we're all in it. We're absolutely in it. And if you're really paying attention, you can see it everywhere. And the contrast is either being done intentionally for us to see, or it's a natural progression of what happens when frequencies reach a certain plateau, so that you can align yourself with what's right, what's appropriate, so that we can align ourselves to the frequencies that are the future, not with things that remain in the past. And that's all here right now in the present. I wanted to read this about fear. So Mornay gave me this in 1991. It says, in your time and space, the expression of fear will be a challenge to you all. For any of you to be in fear, you lack an understanding of most situations. We have observed that your world is a most confused point in your history and the involvement. It says, we understand your remarkable drive and commitment to being alive. We, however, are not understanding of your need to create tools of death, expecting that they will keep you in a state of understanding and peace. We have observed that you build, create, and plant in a space of fear, not in a consciousness of love. So your defense positions of institutions that create and employ are always in a state of unraveling and disintegration. We share this with you because they drain you and your earth of energy, but spiritually and materially and physically. Fear always has to be fed. Fear does not create itself, it has to feed. The fear we observe is difficult to understand. It depletes you of your focus on the original intent and is a very, very secretive energy. Fear withholds love. This is most saddening to see and to feel. How can you share understanding and love when so many of you are withholding from self and of each other? Please feel the words as we as a race are trying to express to your race. One of your original intentions is creating your physical reality is the idea of creating and learning to manipulate and express yourselves through physicality using your consciousness. It is your consciousness that the isness have given you, and in fact all things that bear spirit. This is the gift that has been clouded and most importantly clouded by fear. This creation is completely irrational to whom we all are. We come to the understanding that withholding love will only perpetuate disintegration. We have discovered in our home galaxy the ruins of vast races achieving recognition. that have ceased to exist. They destroyed themselves simply because they withheld love and drained the very life force out of their intent and imploded and destroyed their self creation. The first projection of fear is denial, an emotion of incredible restriction. Denial and fear results in a complete opposite of reality it claims to be. Fear is based on our perspective, on a misunderstanding of one's own worth and security. Why is this so? We have discussed this amongst ourselves in Andromeda about your race. We have formed a perspective on your history. Many of your religions have both helped and hurt this process. Some of your world beliefs have many convinced they are sinful creatures of nature. Your science teachers that your physical form is a pool of chemicals thrown together by accident, and that you are all an accident, living meaningless lives of chance. You fear a God who a book said is a loving God that will eternally throw you into an abyss for making mistakes. Many in this world have come to understand that in your world, the idea of fear is their enemy. It says, all of you struggle between understanding and fear and reason and fear. This struggle is in no way predetermined. Our perception is that this struggle will lead your world to peace and responsibility or extinction as a race. This would grieve us. It is time to return to be as one. I thought that was a great perspective. Really. Oh, I just lost my necklace. Says James says, would you please put up that video? Says, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to play this for you. This is coming from the Friends of Forrester. And Forrester was a pen name for Thomas Paine. When he was writing his dissertations, his pamphlets, he used the name Forrester to try to enlighten and awaken the people to ideas, and he used the pen name Forrester because the British were still in control and he didn't want to be drawn and quartered and hung. So this was one of the ways, and we're still dealing with some of that idiocy, he says, on the planet. But this first one is called Endangered, and there's another one coming. So I'm going to pause this and see if I can, I'll put the link of that video in here. I don't know if I want to play it because my sound always turns out so crappy. It's so crappy, but I guess I'm not going to play it for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to fix that somehow, but I will put the link to that video called Endangered in here. It's a really great video. You really need to watch that. So I'll put that link in the description below so you can watch it. He says, and I guess there's another one coming. He says it's called When Do We Become Human? So can't wait to see that one. He says they have found the remains of civilizations in our galaxy where those civilizations forgot their original intent and they withheld love. They had societies of fear. They could not overcome it and they destroyed themselves. He says, you know, I've heard the agreement that it's not a human yet. He says, look, I'm not looking to piss you off. I'm not looking to piss anyone off. He says, all I want to do is create a conversation. But when a woman gets pregnant, we know it's not a puppy. We know it's not a puppy, he says, and we're going to be confronted by this issue. by the benevolence. We are going to be confronted with this by the benevolence. I'm warning you, we're going to be confronted by it. And it has to be clear about what it is that we want. We really do. And I think when all of the lies and misrepresentations fall away regarding the planet and the climate and overpopulation and the poisoning of the atmosphere, when all of that is out and finally exposed, the fraud of it, I think it will be a lot clearer for all of us to make much better decisions about, not only for ourselves, but for humanity. Because we have been fed a great deal of dogma that simply is bullshit, he says. The science has been tainted, the science has been a fraud, the numbers have been altered, the food has been intentionally poisoned, the water has been intentionally poisoned, the weather has been manipulated and modified. All these things have been done to control and manipulate humanity into fear. It says all of it by beings who quite frankly cannot stand humanity. I've wanted to read this to you. He says, I've not read this. I frankly can't remember the last time I read this, and this is the Andromedan view of the soul. I once asked Visayas what they teach their children about the concept of the soul, and the true essence of this is the response that he gave me. We are perceivers. We are awareness. We are not objects and have no solidity. We are boundless. The world of objects and solidity is a way of making our passage through our densities convenient. It is only a description that was created to help us. We forget that the description is only a description, and thus we have learned not to entrap the totality of ourselves in a vicious cycle of physicality from which few rarely emerge in a lifetime. And then there was a question, and he kind of scratched that. And then moving on, he says, creating a new reality, that's what's occurring right now. When the question is asked, what do you want? That is the reason for asking that question. For anybody to ask that question is for us to clarify the future. When you clarify the future, you begin the process of creating a new reality for yourself. It says, I had a conversation with Theseus about the idea of creating a new reality and a different way of life. These are the thoughts that he gave me. Create another domain of knowing, communicating, and being. In other words, the domain and calling forth or generating your intent needs to be more distinct. Your physics, as you would call it, is a good example of this calling forth. There have been men on your planet who have called for new domains in thinking that never existed. They invented it. They didn't fantasize about it. They didn't pretend. They literally created a new context for which you call physics. Your humanity is strong with these kinds of examples. No being, however, makes the distinction that this is what they are. I would like to give you an example. He says, your concept of human rights. It wasn't long ago that there was such a concept on your planet. It didn't exist. Your Terrans did not have any rights. Only the kings and priests had their rights. Most of you Terrans did not have any rights. So you and other Terrans created human rights from nothing. You created the domain. That created the human rights, and then you called it forth. You created the language for it. You communicated it to each other, and this communication that you gave had power because it was full of your intent. It has the power to not only represent and to invoke, but to literally bring it forth into being. This is what your race needs to do in order to clearly know yourselves and transform the quality of your lives on your planet. It says this isn't going to be easy, guys. This isn't going to be easy, Alex says. Because at the same time, we're calling for something that we want that's different, that we're going to have to imagine, that we're literally going to communicate with each other to make it more distinct, so that when we call it forth, it's exactly what we want. As we're doing that, we're going to have to pay attention to all the things that were wrong and somehow form perspective on those things and come to some clarity about, okay, we're really sure we didn't want this. And at the same time, look at the injustice and the control and the manipulation. We're also going to have to find somewhere within us a place to not only let it go, but to come to a place of forgiveness so that we can let it go. And I think I've said before in other video, like George Cavassalis, when I went to his conference, he always said, and it made so much sense, that even though these beings are very dark and evil, they were there for a purpose. The dark is there to teach us lessons as well. And in return for us, like this had to be done so that we could awaken to what was going on around us, so we could see the contrast. So in a way, we need to come to terms with that. We have to acknowledge them for that darkness and their part in this movie, this lifetime. And we have to thank them, believe it or not. Like, we have to thank them for playing their part to help us grow, to help us awaken, to help our soul evolve. You know, it seems like it's very, very hard to think of that, to want to acknowledge them for that. But if it's just like the two wolves, you have to acknowledge the light and the dark. We are both. So you have to keep them in balance. So, yes, so we can let it go, so we can heal and we can move on. It says, so we have a lot on our plate. We have a lot on our plate to deal with. He says, now, another observation, and this is an observation I myself have experienced, and I'm going to use the exopolitics arena. But this happens everywhere in our life. When one of us is criticized, when one of us is trashed, when lies are pushed forward about someone because the decision has been made by others to discredit, or they simply want to discredit because they don't like what we're saying or what you're saying, when attacking one, you're attacking more than just one. For example, when someone in exopolitics is trashed or is accused of something and there's absolutely no truth to it whatsoever, not only does he hear it, see it, and feel it, but so do his loved ones. His children hear it and read it. His children's friends see it and hear it. And they in turn put pressure on their friends. The kids, is this true? Is there anything to it? So it hurts everyone down the road, not just the persons who's the target, but their spouse, their partner, their children, their children's friends. It says other family, jobs are lost, careers ruined for something that simply wasn't true. And then when that boomerangs back to the source of the bullshit, because it always does, what you put out, you get back. That's how it works. When you put out crap, you get crap back. When it boomerangs and it comes back to you, not only does it hit you, it hits your spouse, your partner, your children, the friends of your children, and right down the line. Although sometimes I think when I said, like I said earlier, like I feel in my past video, like with everything hitting me all at once, I feel like I try to be this good person. I shine my light. I help other people. I help animals. I'm feeding stray cats outside, and I get crap for that. And like, but if I don't, who will? I try to be this good person, and at times I just have these times where I feel like, why am I why am I trying to be good? Why am I this good person when all I get is shit slung at me, and this left and right, I get things slung at me all the time, all the time. I'm like, it's not even worth it sometimes to be nice, but I don't know how else to be. Like, I can't be a bitch. I can't be an asshole because that's just not me. Like, I can't. I've been told in other jobs, I've been told in plenty of jobs in the past that I have to be a bitch to hold my position. That was when I was a travel agent. And, I literally had to face down my boss and tell her no. Like, I don't care. That's not who I am. And shortly after that, I left. I walked out. That's not me. That's not me as a person. So it's very hard. It's very hard to be nice all the time, and you don't get niceness back, you know. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that happens to. I'm sure many of you that happens to as well. It seems to be my soul group of people. He says, so both parties are wounded, and we see this everywhere. He says, we see this everywhere. The media does this so prevalently. He says, with virtually everyone, whether it's a politician, an actor, a musician, a movie star, he says, it just doesn't matter. When you trash someone with something that simply is not true, just so you can harm them and wound them because you don't like what they're saying, or they're a threat to you in some way, he says it causes disintegration, societal disintegration, because what's lost is trust. That's the first casualty, is trust. And I'm really hoping here in the exopolitics community, with all the things going on in the world today and the movement forward into higher consciousness, and ultimately the reintegration with galactic life, there's no first, he says, there's no first disclosure, ladies and gentlemen. He says our ancestors had first disclosure already. We are reintegrating with the galaxy again. Yes. With other star nations. It's a reintroduction that's occurring here. He says, I'm hoping that we can all be civil with each other, because once those introductions begin, who's ever full of shit, he says, is going to fall away. So there is no need to destroy anybody, because the truth will be all that remains. And if the truth is a threat, then what are you doing here? What are you doing here? He says. You expect it not to come out? He says you expect it not to be observable? Everybody needs to stay in their lane and focus on their message to humanity. And let's end all of this nonsense. And there's been a lot of it for 70 years. There's been a lot of it, and there are no more conspiracy theories. He says they've all come true. Isn't that true? So obviously it's not a conspiracy. It's all come true. Here we are. He says, so no more trashing. No more trashing anybody. When he said that in a way, and it just made me laugh, because I was thinking, it's that thing where like the parents driving the car and the kids are in the back seat fighting, and he's like, don't make me pull over. Don't make me pull over to the side of the road. Don't make me, because you're gonna get it. Just It just made me think of that. I just laughed. He says, and he says, and I mean this. And for those of you coming forward and going to speak, don't turn this into a shit show. This movement, which has been trashed for so long, says, it is now in the forefront, and it's important. It's significant. The information in this field changes humanity forever. He says, don't abuse it. If you're going to do this work, you do it sober, you do it clean, you be direct, you be honest, and you deliver the message with integrity. And if you don't fucking know, you don't know. Exactly. Because this is not about one person. This is not about 10 people. This is about all of us and future generations. And we are on the cusp. It says we are on the cusp of this becoming our remembrance of our original intent. It says of our original intent. We all have multi-dimensional structures in our brain. Where the hell do you think that came from? It came from our souls. And our souls came from someplace else, from source. Who's at my door? Hi, Brandon. Come on. Come on. Come. Hurry up. Hurry up. Come on. Come on. Mommy's recording. Hey, Brittany. Sorry, I got Brandon. He says everything that's happening here is connected to source, all of it. What you say, what you represent, what you do is all connected to source. It's representative of source. You want to say hi? You say hi to everybody. This is Bandit. He's my big boy. Big boy. He's my diabetic baby. I'm calling him Sweet Tooth because he's got this little like thing popping up on his head, and I call it his antler. He's my big boy. Yeah. You want some catnip? We'll get him some catnip. Want some catnip? Oh, what's that? Yummy, yummy. Okay. Well, enough of Bandit. Anyway, he says, if you're disconnected from source, then you're going to act like an asshole. It says, until you know, until you make a decision not to. It says, I urge you, I encourage you to remember that. This is about source. This is about reintegrating with source, both the feminine and the masculine in balance. And in harmony. That's what this is about. It's not about anything else. It's about taking an entire civilization with a remarkable history, with incredible DNA, taking it to another physical level, and then to another physical level to integrate with the rest of the galaxy. This is not about one person. It's not. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about all of us as a collective of soul groups, here forming a planetary soul group that is moving from third to fourth to fifth. That's the big picture here. And if the EBS is close, then so is Space Force, and so is Space Force coming forward and acknowledging itself and what it's been doing and its relationships and where humanity goes forward from here. It says, now, we're either going to be a part of that or we're not. The fact of the matter is, that's where humanity's going, and that's where the planet's going. Nothing can stop what's coming. Nothing, he says. So let's stop the bickering, stay in your lane, share your experience and your knowledge, and let the chips fall as they may. Let the people decide. Let the hearts decide what resonates to them, and it's going to change. Everybody is evolving and going through change. And for those of us who are speakers, we are just bridges from this point to that point. That's it. And when it's over, we step back and others come forward to take them from here to the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level. He says that's how this works. That's how it's always worked. It's not about glory, it's not about wealth, because none of that shit goes with you, he said. Of course, it doesn't. When you end a physical form and then go to another, he says, you know what goes with you? You know what it is that you look at first? He says, when you cross over and you leave all this behind, you look at the places where you withheld love. That's what you look at. That's what you're called on. Why did you choose to withhold love? And that's a big one. He kind of laughs and he says, that's a big one. In all your righteous indignation, no matter who you are, all of your righteous indignation doesn't mean shit when you're confronted with that. Why did you make the decision to withhold love? That is a huge one when you really stop and think about it. Like I said, and he has that saying, the pain that you withhold, or the love that you withhold is the pain that you carry lifetime after lifetime. That stayed with me so ingrained in my head that I try to live by that every day, that when I'm confronted with a situation where it could upset me or I could show compassion, I think about that. It pops in my head and I'm like, okay, I can't get upset. I can't get mad. I need to show compassion for this person or for this animal, for, you know, it just makes you think, and I love that saying. Okay, and he says, okay, let's do questions. And he laughs. First question, how is consciousness linked to the soul? If consciousness can be transferred to clones and souls not be transferred, then are clones aware they don't have a soul? And can high density beings fractionate their soul and consciousness to embody a clone if they choose to? His answer was, my understanding is that the clones are grown through an organic microprocessor in their heads, and the consciousness is physically transferred to the microprocessor. That's my understanding. He says the soul is not actually present, but just the consciousness. The behavior patterns and emotional reactions, all of that is then transferred. But the soul itself is not there. That's my understanding of how this works. It's an organic microprocessor that is grown inside to mimic the brain. Where it's different is that where the soul not only attaches to the heart, but also to the nervous system. Obviously, that's not the case in the clone. When he said that about the microprocessor, organic microprocessor in the brain, it just made me think. I'm going to say something real quick here, and it's very controversial because George Cavassalis, 10, 11, 12 years ago, was doing the rounds, the circuits, the radio shows, all that. And when he was finally coming out and speaking about the chakra systems being manipulated, and the pineal gland, he thinks was an organic implant. Okay, and it makes you think. It really makes you think. He says because it's calcified, it's calcifying because the body, anytime it has a foreign object in your body's going to try to get rid of it. So he's saying the calcification of it was to try and get rid of it. Okay. And that didn't sit well with a whole lot of people, but you have to keep an open mind. I have kept an open mind on this. We don't know the truth about anything, And especially in this new age community, religion, whatever, they're always telling you pineal gland, like that's your third eye, that's what you do everything with, blah, 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 blah. But that's what they tell us. But is it true? Why are there all these hieroglyphics, and why does the church always have that pine cone, which we always see is, oh, that's your pineal gland, pine cone. Maybe it is some kind of an organic implant. Maybe it is. We don't know that. But that also brings me to a point where somebody asked a question a few webinars back to Alex of what the purse was that they were carrying, what the Anunnaki, they have that purse that they carry on the hieroglyphics, and he didn't know. I just saw a video that Yellow Rose for Texas put out, and she said those purse are called, I think she said it was a keist, and basically they were to catch souls. And that kind of threw me back for a minute because I was like, okay, well, Alex was talking about Tesla being captured in this container. And she just said those purses were soul catchers, like the Ghostbusters movies where they like shoot that ray and they take that ghost and they suck the soul into that container. Just made me thinking. So just keep an open mind of this. So he's saying these clones have these organic microprocessors that act as part of like a brain system for these clones. So just kind of makes you think, okay? Keep an open mind about that. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's getting dark outside. My light's on, so it's hard for me to read. He says, okay, so that's my understanding. The soul is not actually present, but just the consciousness, the behavior patterns and emotional reactions, all of that. Okay, I already read that. Okay, so next question. Anything new from Mornay? He says, yes, and I will share that with you when I can. Next question. Do you have any thoughts about Vivian Chauvet being disinvited from the Orlando conference? Alex says, I still support Vivian Chauvet. I think she's a remarkable healer and I like her very much. I think she's a very sincere person. So we won't know what that was all about. He says, those issues, he says, is above my pay grade. I was invited as a guest as well. That is something I will not comment on, but my experience with Vivian has always been very, very positive. Next question. Thank you for all you do to keep us informed and for your service to Terra. I've been hearing a lot of chit-chat on Telegram saying that August is going to be a hot month, September would be a deep month, and October would be red. I would appreciate your thoughts on the next few months coming up. And he says, well, I think energetically we can all feel an increase in angst, and we're looking at the world's global political scene. It's a race to the bottom, he says. And we, the people, are watching this insanity and saying, why are you putting the pedal to the metal to crash into the wall? What are you thinking? And it's good to be seeing that. He says it's appropriate to be seeing that. And we're also seeing very, very strange behavior in those people, in the world leaders. He says, and more people are questioning, is that really the person? And he laughs. Is that really the person? And that's also good. And I think the more deliberate the idiocy is, the more attention that it's garnering from people asking, what in the world are you doing? He says, and that's good. And that's good. Because people are seeing the contrast of what we did have to where they want to go. He says, they, the elite, where they want to go. He says people are seeing the contrast and now they're taking steps back and saying, no, that's not at all what I want, which means they're making decisions for themselves. They are retrieving and pulling back their power, and they're not just giving it away to the world's leaders, to the government, to politics, to religion, as they have been. They are no longer going along to get along. They're now stepping out of it and no longer feeding it with their energy. It says this is very, very positive. That is the first step to someone reclaiming their sovereignty, taking back their personal power and wanting to make changes for themselves and for their immediate family. This is very good because if you're going to create a race of leaders, you have to go through those steps first, where you reclaim your sovereignty. I see it as positive, I do. In the grand scheme of things, I see it all as being very positive. It can be scary though, but again, you have to understand we're not alone here. We're not alone. We have each other. We have Source, which has always been here. And for those of you who've added your own personal experiences with spirit, with angels, with benevolence, even regressives, you know they're there. It says you know they're there. That's not a question for you anymore. You know it's not an am I crazy? You're past that point. But just imagine that they're all positive, that they are here to assist, not to do for us, but to assist. Then you should feel very, very good about the future. We just have to get past this dismantling of the old system. It all has to be dismantled. Next question. Can you provide any information on how the mind reading technique telepathy used by the deep state works and how it's being used to manipulate humanity? Do the negative fourth density beings here have natural telepathy? And Alex answers, we all have natural telepathy. We use it with our children. We use it with our pets. He says, I think we don't take it seriously enough and we take it for granted. As far as the other stuff, he says, there are so many other people who can talk about this. Remote viewers talk about this. He says, Carrie Cassidy has talked about this. Super soldiers talk about this. There are so many other people that talk about this phenomenon that all you have to do is go into any search engine, type that in, and there's video after video and testimony after testimony, including people who were part of DARPA and some of the other groups that created that technology they've been using. So that information is out there. He says, so let's get on to another question that's in my lane. Next question. You have previously said that if we dream in color, we are astrally traveling. With all the brain and AI issues we're being warned about, entities can come into our dreams and appear to trick us. Can the place you live or the events of the dream be manipulated? How can we determine that our dreams are genuine or a trick? Thank you for all you do. Alex says, wow, that's a very interesting question. If you have an entity attached to you, a parasite entity attached to you, then there's always that opportunity for you to be manipulated. But if your energy field is clean, if you're astrally traveling in color, then you're not being manipulated because there's nothing out there that's left to control, to manipulate, and to screw with you. The atmosphere has been cleaned. The space around us has been cleaned. He says, now, there are energy attachments on the earth, dead souls that haven't crossed over, and other things. They're getting a little desperate because the third density physicality is changing and it's moving into fourth. At some point, they will dissolve their attachment to you because your frequency is rising. They will fall off and they will have to go back to source. That is the only circumstance that I am aware of at the moment that you would have any need of concern. The only one. He says, so I don't know how you resonate to that. I don't know how you feel about that, but that is absolutely my answer. Okay. Next question. Can you tell us something about the Galactic Confederation? Thank you for your comment. Alex says, I'm more of an alliance guy. I've shared that with you. Whenever I talk to Mornay, he refers to it as the Alliance. He doesn't call it the Galactic Federation. Now, that's not to say that's what others call it. I'm also aware there are people out there talking about it disintegrating, it's falling apart, yada, yada, yada. It's been compromised. He said, look, so let me just address this whole thing for you. It says at this particular time, and this is coming from fifth density Andromedans, who are connected to the Andromedan Council, who are connected to the sixth density council that is actually pulling most of the strings here. He says they're mentoring everyone down the line, okay? Any star nations that have left the alliance or this project of our solar system, they have done so voluntarily for their own personal reasons. Or in the case of one group, they were asked to leave because they were misrepresentative of their true feelings about their assistance here in our solar system. Now let me explain how we know this. Everybody is checking everybody else's work. Fifth density is checking those in fourth. Fourth are checking those in third, and sixth is checking everyone else's. Fifth, fourth, third, everybody is checking each other's work. No one gets away with anything. No one holds or hides anything. Everybody's involved in this, and they're here because of their authenticity. All right. He says, this is going down. He says, third density, Earth, Terra, going from third to fourth to fifth, this is happening. If something comes up and a group can't step up, then they're being asked to leave. And if something's going on internally amongst their people, you got to remember that those on fifth and sixth can read the intentions of others. They watch their chains of thoughts. Just like we have been under that microscope as well. They are watching our chains of thoughts. They know who's fucking real. He says they know who is authentic. They know who's being true to themselves. He says the shenanigans are over. I can't express that enough to you. He says to everybody, the shenanigans are over. There has to be a point where we all begin to truly trust the process. He says, I got why we don't. He says, man, I do get it. He says, but at some point we have to reach that place where we trust. We just trust. Your intuition kicks in and your presence, your soul kicks in, and it just says, this is the way. This is the right way. this is the way, and then you commit to it because you know it's what you're supposed to do. And that's on an individual basis. And that's because you trust your own intuition. I get that. We're all learning that. We get there. He says, we get there. The definition of our future is self determination to unconditionally to be responsible for oneself without being coerced by some higher authority. That's our future. It's already been predetermined. So what we're going through is a process. It's a process of letting go of all the hurt and pain, all the deceit, just all of it. He says, as we see it, and then stepping in that which you are creating yourself, which is always important to know what you want, okay? I'm not creating your stuff. You're not creating my stuff. Collectively, he says, we are creating freedom and an ascension process. But individually, we're all going through letting go all of the baggage, all the hurt, all the pain, just all of it, so that we can move forward. Ooh, it's getting really dark. Look at my face. Oh my gosh. And I'll say something really quick too. My first couple of videos, if you watch the reptilian families, snake families, and the Moloch families, that's information from Yellow Rose from Texas. She talks about Federation, anything called a Federation, anything with Feder in it. She's saying Feder, like it resonates with me. So she's saying Feder means kin of. And then all the endings like EL, L, like Superman is Kal-El. It's the L family that comes from Superman. Okay? L. L. So EL, AL, IL, Federal, any words that end in that. Those are the elite families, the bloodlines. Okay? So when you put together Federation, it's basically saying they're the bloodkin of these families. So I kind of don't trust anything. I'm with Alex. I would rather go with someone named Alliance or Council versus Confederation or Federation. So that's what I kind of go off of. So go back and watch my videos on those. She has a lot of information that you can't find on YouTube anymore. That information is gone. I sat and transcribed all those videos several years ago, and I kept them. And lo and behold, they're not on YouTube or anywhere anymore. So I have all that information on my videos, snake families, and the Molochs. So go back and watch those first few videos of mine. Next question was asked by Elena Danan. She says, we have to remember who we are through a different method. Who and why are blocked out to remember where we come from and who we really are. It's obvious someone programmed us to not remember from which planet we come from or a past reincarnation. Who and why blocked out our memory and where did we come from? Which is interesting because I asked that in a couple of my videos back, I think. And I was like, when someone asked that question, I said, okay, so we know like Enki created our physical form to look more like the Anunnaki. You know, they took the beings from here and they mixed our DNA and physically they made this form. But our soul is our soul. No one messed with that. That comes from source. So who, and I asked that question, someone needs to ask that question in a webinar about who were the ones that turned off? If Enki was for humanity and we know Enlil was against us, who was it that turned off our DNA? Who turned off that remembrance from us? Was it Enlil's side or was it Draconians that came in? Like, We don't know. He actually doesn't really answer that question in here. He doesn't say who, but I'll just read you his answer. He says, well, let me see if I can pull this up here. It says, let me answer that question this way. Because of the psychological, chemical, emotional manipulation of humanity, many of us got trapped incarnating here on this planet when the third strand of DNA was turned off. We weren't coming in with full knowledge. This was an issue for those incarnating over and over and over again. You also have the Orion AI system fully implemented here, which was creating and adding frequency, a very low frequency, to the matrix of the reality that we are beginning to realize isn't real, that we've been fed. He says, we have been kept on a farm, and we were the animals on the farm. We were the ones being manipulated, and our own energy was being used to feed and create the farm. And those that were feeding off of our energy were not us. They were not Terrans. So I guess it would be those people, but we still don't know like which race basically did that to us. It says new souls were coming in, very, very evolved souls who were coming in with memory, with probably their third strand turned on, but then they were given water with fluoride, then they were given vaccines, multiple vaccines, and if you notice the vaccine charts from the 1950s to where we are today, it has multiplied by 4 or 5. The amount of vaccines, and each vaccine had a very specific program structured in it for our DNA. And that's because they were trying to shut us down. And we're shutting down all of these incredible souls coming in. However, the frequency of the soul remained intact. Though they didn't have the memory, and those who may have had the memory have been targeted for abuse, organ harvesting, adrenochrome, etc., etc., etc. Says when all of this is revealed to everyone, you're going to realize this agenda is dark beyond anything you could have imagined, especially the intention behind what they were doing. And I don't want to go there. He says, you know, I've talked about this, the kids, for years and years and years, and it still hurts. Still hurts even after all these years. But it's out there now and people are talking about it. The military is aware of it and they're doing things. Things are finally being done to end this globally. And I can only be thankful to all those people that are doing this work. The work for us. Well, it says the work for us will be to console and to hold compassion for the parents who lost their children this way. That's going to be a big one. And we're all going to have to come together to hear that, all of us, because we are a family. We are a Terran soul group, and moving forward, we're going to have to protect all of the children, whether they're ours or not, moving forward. We have to change our mindset about this, and I think we will naturally gravitate to that place once all the horrific things have been shared with humanity that have been going on and who and what were doing it. Okay, next question. How do we keep evil beings from attaching to us? Some are compromised and manipulated by evil. Are they aware of what's happening to them? How do these souls free themselves, and how do they know they are working for the dark? Alex answers, typically, if your vibration is high and you eat well and you take care of yourself and you're healthy, they're not going to attach to you. Typically, people who have attachments are people who do a lot of drugs, have a lot of addictions, do a lot of drinking, have anger management issues, anywhere that they can feed off of that energy, where their self-worth is very low. They like to attach because that's a walk in the park to an entity. I know someone exactly live with it every day. Marianne Winkowski does a lot of videos, and she talks a great deal about this. She was the original ghost whisperer. She's very, very good, and she's definitely knows her shit, he says. So she talks a lot about this and even has a book, as there are many people who are ghost hunters. He says Michael Knopf is another one. I can't pronounce his last name, who's on Knights of Terra. I guess that's the Telegram page he's talking about, who is very, very knowledgeable on this type of thing as well. He says maybe he will step forward out of the dark and come into the light and share his knowledge with you guys on Knights of Terra. He says there are many other people who do this kind of work. All that's going away with the frequency shift. All of it's going away. He says they're all going to have to go back to source. So at some point, everyone will be free. Next question. Is it possible there are a minimum of 2 versions of me? One on this earth and another somewhere else in this galaxy? Is it possible that during my sleep, I am the other me? I always have the feeling I'm traveling during my sleep. I've definitely had dreams of that quite often. You just feel like it's another lifetime. And Alex says there are a lot of people having that same experience. He says they do when they sleep and they travel. It's like they're having 2 simultaneous lifetimes in 2 very different places, and yet you're fully aware you're the same person. You're not alone in that. That idea. He says, I myself have had those experiences since I was a little boy, and I continue to have them. He says, so my answer is yes, it is very possible and probable that that is in fact going on. We are multi-dimensional beings. We are. And time is not linear. We're conditioned to think so here, but it's not. But it's not. Time is really not linear, especially when you leave the atmosphere. So that's another wrinkle for you to figure out. All right, next question. Last week you said the Anunnaki arrived on Earth about 450,000 years ago. The biblical alcoholic Yahweh appears to be a genocidal Anunnaki demigod who drank gallons of beer and wine. How are the Anunnaki and their planetary Nibiru spaceship different from the Elohim? Are they both returning to Earth soon? Alex says, okay. And he pauses for a long time to think. And he says, the Old Testament is a compilation of plagiarized stories from ancient civilizations, most of them the Chaldeans. Which isn't there in Star Trek? There's the Chaldeans. Yes. Isn't that funny? The rewriting of the Old Testament was done by Hebrew scribes. Those Hebrew scribes, their forefathers, their ancestors all dealt with Jehovah, who worked for Enlil. He says, I don't know of any other way to just say this straight away. He says, you cannot you cannot count any of that as the word of God. You just cannot. And I know that's going to freak out and flip out a lot of people, he says. Proof of that is, he says, go online and look up the Sinai Bible, translations of the Sinai Bible, that the British Museum is doing in comparison to the King James Version. There are already 30,000 discrepancies. It says major discrepancies. He says that changed everything, and the Sinai Bible was compiled in 500 AD. It says around before and up until that point. It's been rewritten so many times after that by priests and rabbis that all had their own agendas. There's no other way to say it. Is there a creator? Yes, that source, that presence created all of the dimensions. Says, was all the people that we dealt with, forefathers dealt with on earth, were they God? They were known as gods because of their technology. He says, but they were extraterrestrial or multidimensional beings, which is still an ET. At this point, the Gospel of Thomas is far more reliable than the New Testament, and going within, you connecting to Source, to your higher self, to God, is where you need to go. That's my opinion, and I realize it flies in the face of everybody else. But you know what? This is your decision. You need to empower yourself. Only you can empower you. Only you can discover who you are. Okay. You don't need me to do that. You just need you. Said so. It's back on you to do the work. But for me, that has been and it is my truth. It's a collection of stories. Yes, there is some knowledge. Yes, there's definitely is some wisdom in it. But did Creator pen it? Did he write it? No, it didn't happen at all that way. It says you have to ask yourself, why were there a lot of books of the Bible taken out? 77 to be exact in 1611. And that coincides with the printing press. It's interesting, right? He says that the Gospel of Thomas, you want to know the words of Jesus, the Gospel of Thomas has far more in it than you'll ever read in the New Testament. It's interesting, isn't it, that that's why they took it out. The book of Enoch is another one. The book of Mary Magdalene is another interesting one. All the books they took out. That's the first place I would go to do some research. Because the powers that be don't want you to have power. They never did. They wanted to control what you thought, what you saw, and what you think, and what you feel. That's what they wanted to do. So, whatever would change that or threaten that, they were removing from your peripheral. So, we should probably end it there. And he laughs. Says, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Yes, August should be most interesting. We appreciate you more than you know for your time and your support. There's a lot of information out there. How do you feel about it? Okay? How do you feel about it? Do you resonate to it? Then look into it. If you don't, then it's either not time or you're never going to. Okay? There's certain people, yeah. I didn't really like Elena at first because she wasn't jiving with me. And then it took me a while. Because Alex kind of kept praising her. And I was like, okay, well, there's got to be something to it. If he likes her and he, you know, resonates with her a lot, I'm going to give her a shot. And like, it just took me, a month or two. And then I started jiving with it. And I was like, okay, yeah, that does resonate with me, And not everything she says still resonates, but most of it sure does. Says my job was to just give you information, share information with you, and share a perspective, and to at least help you step into your own power and your own relationship or leadership capabilities. That's all I'm here to do. He says, not to be head of a cult or anything like that. He says that was never ever the intention on it and will never be. He says, I don't have a website. He says, I'm not selling you all kinds of stuff that you don't need. None of that. He says, I wasn't in this for the money. He says, if I could still work, that's what I would be doing, and these would be free. He says, God bless, take care. I love you, respect all of you. He says, I ask you to love and respect yourselves, okay? I guess we'll talk in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye. So, wonderful information. If you like this, share this with other people. Hit the like button. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, so support Alex. Go to alexcollier.org. He's got tons of information there. Every Friday afternoon, well, 3 weeks out of the month, he does the either question and answer, or he gives his webinars with JP and James. So go over there and support him, support all of them. They're wonderful. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of you. I love all of my soul family. And again, I wish I could give you all a great big hug. Hopefully things are gonna, more things are gonna be coming out here in the next month or so. I'm sure hoping. I just wish it would crash. Just crash overnight. Go ahead. I don't care anymore. So anyway, it is totally dark outside and raining. Wow, and it's 5 o'clock. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate. If you have any questions, email me, leave a comment. Thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully have a good weekend. And yeah, as my band always says, so say we all. It's kind of like where we go one, we go all. That's the saying from Battlestar Galactica, which I love that show. So say we all. And I love all of you. Mwah. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.